Hello everyone, this is Jonathan Little. We are going to continue reviewing CzechRaizor's win of the big $5 tournament on PokerStars recently. So far things have been going pretty good. We will keep moving forward.
Yeah, it's another spot where I should or could consider free betting, but I'm not a huge fan of free betting pocket pairs because I do not block any value range. Well, it is easy to play once you hit or miss. Both cases are very easy to play. Well, these hands, they don't have any barreling equity, so it's often one and done, just free betting once and giving up on one's call on the flop, which is not the best scenario. Out of position, especially when you are facing an aggressive opponent and being out-chipped. So I think I opted to fold, yeah, and I would not mind set mining here out of position from small blind. So I like the fold.
I would almost always 3-bet that hand. That's a spot where this guy's opening the button very wide, and you have to just ask yourself, if you're folding this hand, what else are you folding? And in this spot, you're going to be folding, really almost everything besides reasonable. I guess you could 3-bet all the ace X's, but pocket fours is a decent value hand, and for you to fold it here, you're kind of saying that you just do not want to mess around versus this guy who's obviously playing too many pots, and you want to play somewhat straightforward. And I don't think we want to be playing straightforward. I think we want to be pushing people around and trying to chip up.
I think it is the best of option offered. This suited gapper, one gapper, ace 10 8 suited. Yeah, when I was sitting on 7 10 suited, I was hypothetically discussing hand ranges that I would open here, and I think 8 10 suited is one of them. It's good enough to open, even with these two people, and especially the very loose and unpredictable player in the big blind.
So you're talking back to the previous part. In that scenario, I believe you were on the cutoff when you opened. So I think you would pretty much always raise 10-7 suited in this spot as well. I think it's just a hand that's too good to fold, assuming you're actually trying to win the tournament, which we are.
But the hand's got enough flopability and playability to compensate for his calls, and I'll be playing pots in position, so I can pot control and play some flop mid pairs with pot control and proceed with caution. At the same time, when I flop a big hand, I could get lots of value from this play type. Queen jack off once facing 3x. There's only one option for me, and I still fold. I kind of paused and stalled because I was thinking whether this is the final table, and looking at the stacks and seating, I'm pretty sure it is the final table. So this is the final table.
All right, we made it. Whenever you change tables, but particularly when you get to the final table, you always want to look around the table and assess everyone's chip stack. So let's just start with the guy who's under the gun. We have Sar, who has 30 big blinds, then we have 20 big blinds. Call it 25 big blinds, 30, 25, 20, 30, and a bunch. And then also a bunch. So this is a spot where everyone's going to be playing a somewhat short-stacked game. And there's nothing wrong with that. We just have to realize that we are playing somewhat shallow stack poker. Most people probably are not going crazy. They're just going to play reasonably face up. And knowing that, you should probably not be too crazy, at least to start. And one other relevant tip whenever you get to the final table is you typically want to sit back, relax, and give your opponents some time to see what give yourself some time to see what your opponents are going to do. You want to know if they're just going to be crazy, if they're going to be somewhat snug. But very often at a final table, someone just tries to give their stack away. And if you are there ready to collect their stack, that's going to work out pretty good for you.
Okay, looking at the stacks, I'm one of the middle stacks, which has got pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages. I have to be very cautious, I have to be very careful not to tangle with same stacks, and especially larger stacks. But there's not really a real short stack, so I'm not like too worried, but at the same time I should not be taking too many risks and wait how this situation develops. So should choose my spots really carefully. Probably not opening this 8-4 suited, which I would do on in early phases of the tournament, or as a default I would open this, but I don't think it's a good idea having this big stack on the button, who I managed to get a lot of information from watching the other table, the outer table. I watched lots of hand on the other semi-final table, and he was like relentless with aggression, doing lots of 3-bets, lots of 4-bets. I think he 5-bet jump pocket 6s, or that type of hand. So I was really worried that he would put a lot of pressure on me. So that's why I'm skipping this ace-4. Also, somebody could jam, and I think let's hope it is the best way to play, or to deal with this hand at this early stage of a final table.
Yeah, I'm fine with the fold. Also, I mean, you are in pretty early position. It's not like you are in late position. As you mentioned, this guy here is probably going to be pretty aggressive. He can still apply pressure to you, even though there is no obvious short stack. So I like the fold. I don't really see a reason to raise it with your stack size. I would just, like I said, hang out, not do anything too ridiculous, and hopefully either just chip up with relatively few risks, or just allow other people to go broke before you go broke, before you actually start really getting after it.
Yeah, this guy was just betting. I thought we'll see down the road. Alright, let's skip through very obvious decisions again.
I may defend that big blind there with Queen 8 offsuit.
Ace 7 in the button. I think this is a decent hand to 3-bet, because this way I could put maximum pressure on this guy who's got slightly less chips than I do. Well, we are level stacks, so whilst it is true that I should not be tangled with a stack with same amount of chips, like middle stacks, it is the same should be valid, also the same should be true for him, so he should avoid tangling with me either. I'm not sure how much people are considering ICM at $5 in a $5 tournament at the final table, but let's hope he does, and I think this is a good spot. Well, I remember this one that I went for a 3-bet. I think, yeah. Yes. Yeah, so given all these reasons, I think it's a good type of hand to 3-bet. Not very happy once I get called, but it is an ace blocker, and I do not see these guys to do any, well, although there's a little bit of a crazy factor sitting in a big blind, as like cold calling is not out of a question once he finds like a pretty hand on pretty suited Broadway, or hands like these. So that makes this spot a little bit less attractive, and I wonder, given that risk, whether I should have taken and should have opted for this spot in retrospect. Okay.
I definitely like the 3-bet in this scenario. I think that your hand is great to do it with, given you have the ace blocker. I don't really see any other good options in this spot. I think that folding is definitely too tight. Calling's obviously no good, so 3-betting it is. I mean, this is a spot where if you watch a lot of the best players, they almost blindly go for it. The main times you will not want to go for it here are when you expect to get jammed on almost every time, which I don't think we have a reason to believe that, or when you have, whenever you're losing a large chunk of your chips to go for it. And here, this is obviously a decent chunk of your chips, but like if you were a little bit shorter, perhaps you should just be jamming. But even then, you're not loving it. So I think this is just a fine spot to re-raise. That's what it amounts to.
It's still a bit 20 BB sharp for this guy, and it looks very tight. So there's quite a few factors, quite a few pros and cons. So, and I did get a fold, so this is the best possible result for me. Yeah, obviously him calling and me taking it down on the flop, this is a very good result. And I kind of move away a little bit from other short stacks or middle stacks, which is very significant at this stage.
Yeah, that's great.
We have a first big hand set up, very strong ranges, clashing and interacting. Yeah, I can't see myself 3-betting here once I already did that with this guy, so interacting.
Yeah, so this spot is very different than the previous spot where you were on the button. In this spot, you have to fade a lot of people at the table. So anytime you have to fade a lot of people, meaning you have to raise through a lot of players or re-raise through a lot of players, you typically want to have something, right? And I do not think this hand counts as something. I think it's just way too weak. So I would definitely fold in this scenario.
Yeah, I can't see myself 3-betting here once I already did with this guy, so I think folding is the best option. And I folded. So let's move on to another hand. Right, just out of curiosity, I would like to go through this elimination and see the ranges. Yeah, very, very standard open, and I think this reshove with 10-11 bigs. Yeah, I wonder what you think. Seems very borderline to me. It seems very...
So interesting spot. The initial opener is not crazy by any means, right? It's somewhat snug. I think I would probably defend with this pre-flop. I would just call with the ace-10 offsuit and then try to flop well. I think whenever you shove, your opponent's going to call you pretty much every time when he's opening. And I imagine versus his opening range, you are not really loving your spot. So I think you actually want to call and then just try to flop well. Of course, we see he was completely dominated. I think folding would be a little bit too tight. So I think the only great play here is to call, unless you think you have a lot of pre-flop fold equity. If you think you have a lot of pre-flop fold equity, then I think shoving becomes perfectly fine. So depends a lot on what you think about your opponent, but given we see this guy is far from crazy, I like the idea of calling.
Very close, given the relative positions, and it seems very close. Will be interesting. And again, skipping through some hands that I didn't play, or at least considered unplayable for the time being. And here we are with somewhat playable hand in the small ace jack off in the small blind. Okay. So this stack depth of a 9M and 22, 3, 4 blinds. Yeah. I just don't have enough experience in deep runs to be able to say which way is the best, which way is the best way, and I don't remember what I did, so fold. Seems a bit tight. At the same time, it feels like a big reshove to be risking quite a lot, given this two short stacks shorter than me. So this is the reason, I think. I hope now this is the primary reason that I just skipped this spot and did not shove. In retrospect, do you think I should have defended? I wonder whether I should have defended. It feels like defend. Looking at the situation now. Yeah. Anyway, I opted to make a tight fold, or what seems to be a tight fold, replaying the spot of the situation. So I folded, and the big blind folds as well, and this is the end of the hand.
So we had ace jack offsuit in the spot. I would, given if we know this guy was playing 25/23, he's probably opening way too wide. So if he's opening way too wide, I think we should probably just go ahead and shove. I think we're gonna have a lot of fold equity, and by shoving, we make it very difficult to get outplayed. Make it difficult for us to get outplayed after the flop. Whereas if we call, we are gonna get outplayed after the flop, at least sometimes. So I think to avoid getting outplayed, you just want to shove. So that's what I would probably do in this exact scenario, knowing this information. I think calling's okay. I don't have a problem with calling, mainly because our hand is great. And notice the guy in the big blind is actually pretty snug. So it's not like he is overly active or anything like that. So in this spot, I think I would either shove or call, but I don't mind folding. So the main benefit to folding is that you make it very difficult for you to go broke in this hand. And I'm sorry, the main benefit of calling is you make it very difficult for you to go broke in the hand. Whereas if you shove and you happen to be dominated or flipping, which you will be some portion of the time, you definitely do not want to be getting it in. So I'm really okay with any of the options. If the main time I would be folding in this spot, as you did here, is when the initial razor is very tight. If the initial razor is tight, I love fold, but with these stats, I think you just have to play this pot either by shoving or calling, one of the two. I'm not a big fan of re-raising small and then folding with ace-jack. And that spot is
not the hand that I'll be playing. Given this aggressive guy in the big blind, I think I skipped. I didn't play this, which is good, which is what I like. Queen 7. I mean, this would not be an open Jack 10 off. Once facing EP raise, that's a very clear fold. Go defend, bet call, check, check, don't bet. All right. So there's nothing to be gained. There's no information to be gained from that hand, from that spot. And this Theo opens to 3x, and this is a really wild, speculative, and weird defend given the stack size. All right, and he folds the flop, so it's even more alarming or interesting.
You'll see this kind of thing in the small stakes games a lot. A lot of players tell me that in the small stakes games, people will just call off 3 big blinds pre-flop with all sorts of garbage, and then just check fold whenever they don't have anything. And that seems obviously horrible to me, but that is what a lot of these players do because they want to see a flop with their hands they think are reasonable. I definitely think that it's a bad play, but if you know someone does this kind of thing, you don't need to be so concerned whenever you raise and they do defend, because now you know that these players are going to be defending a little bit wider than they should and then just playing somewhat straightforward on the flop, which is actually good. I mean, you'd rather your opponent give you the extra 2 big blinds or big blind and a half and then fold, which is usually what this type of player ends up doing.
Or strange. I don't think I would be defending this. I would be defending 6-4, 6-5 suited, but not 3-5. And once there's a 3-bet, it's just very clear to me to be getting out of the way here. 7-4. Yeah, given how tight this guy is, I like shoving, but I do not hate like 2.6, 2.7xing and folding. Just I cannot see this guy abusing that ever. If it was competent opponent, it would be very interesting because it's 5.5m, and for 6m, it is a plus Nash EV shove for 6m, 7-5, 7-4 suited, and he should be pressured at this spot, having another short stack at the table. So he should not be calling for 6m. He should be calling from big blind. Once being shoved on from small blind, he should be calling 40.6%, which is completely out of the question. I do not see him calling like King 6 suited plus, Queen 8 off, Jack 8 suited, Jack 9 off, 10 8 suited. So there's a lot of hands there's plenty of hands that you should be and will be folding. So this shove is a massively plus EV, but at the same time I'm just speculating whether taking another route of making like a large raise, relatively, or rather large raise, like 2.6, 7x, and then once I run into top of this range, once I've been jammed on, I will have a very comfortable fold, knowing that I'm not being abused by this play type. Interesting spot.
So in this scenario, you want to ask yourself, how likely is this guy to ever abuse me? And you just said you don't think it's ever happening. I tend to not believe that people will just never abuse you. Also, will this guy decide to just shove with a hand like King 6 if you raise, whereas maybe he decides to fold if you jam? Given this is just a very plus EV shove, as you suggested, I think I would just go ahead and shove this and not worry about it too much. I think that your hand is not too particularly good. It's not too strong. And if you raise and get called, you're certainly not loving it. And, you know, for all we know, this is the type of player who may defend kind of wide and then play straightforwardly, or maybe it's the type of guy who's going to slow play when he calls. It's impossible to know, or pretty difficult to know at least. So I would just shove this. I think shoving gives you a very clean plus EV situation. But again, if you know this guy is going to be very tight, maybe you should just raise fold it. That could allow you to get off the hook whenever you happen to run into a nut hand. The problem is that if he's ever doing it without a nut hand, if he's ever shoving without a nut hand whenever you raise, then you would much rather have preferred to shove yourself, because you don't really want to be putting in 2.7x or something like that and then folding to a shove, because usually you're getting a reasonable price to call and probably almost break even with a hand like 7-4 suited once you put in 2.7x.